Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings, to the WeAreChange daily news show, where together we find out that reality is actually totally different than what the authorities tell us it is. And that's why I do these videos, to explain to you what the hell really is happening. And of course, the biggest thing happening today is Donald Trump announcing his new national security strategy, a new grand strategy for U.S. foreign policy that is very similar to his predecessors, and it came off like a speech that would normally be made by George W. Bush or even Jeb Bush himself, where Donald Trump reiterated a lot of his campaign promises. And one stark difference was, of course, Donald Trump's emphasis on economic competitiveness between China and Russia, calling both of those countries revisionist powers, even going as far as painting Russia as a destabilizing force intent to returning to the Cold War era sphere of influence. And no, sheesh, Sherlock, we've been talking about the major economic wars for years now that has been happening between Russia, the United States, and of course China, revolving around the petrodollar and American foreign policy. Even though the mainstream media largely ignored that factor, at least Trump made it official about what exactly is happening on the world stage now. Now, my contention around this speech is that primarily Donald Trump's words are a lot different than his actions, especially when it comes to his foreign policy. He keeps saying, "Put America first," when in reality, it's the banksters, which we're going to cover later in this video, it's Saudi Arabia, and of course, Israel, which of course is seeing an upsurge in violent protests that have been happening in that country ever since Donald Trump announced that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. A very controversial move that have led the Israelis to crack down and arrest a lot of people for these protests. And of course, an upsurge in violence, which the world was warning Donald Trump would happen if he made this controversial move. Now, of course, Israel always responds with a heavy hand, and they have even started shelling various areas in Gaza as we're speaking right now. And of course, this controversial decision went to the United Nations after Egypt drafted a resolution that would nullify the United States' recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, a vote that would reject Donald Trump's move, which was just voted in favor for 14-1 at the UN Security Council. Now, of course, the United States vetoed this bill, described it as an insult, and saying that the United States won't be told where it could put its embassy. Now, of course, with the United States standing strong with their ally, Israel, and the United Nations pretty much being a pointless bureaucratic body, I expect violence to increase in that region, which of course ultimately is boiling down to a potential war between Iran and Israel, which we will be following closely on this YouTube channel. And now let's talk about making Saudi Arabia great again, another one of Trump's allies in the region, where the United Kingdom once again reiterated and condemned Saudi Arabia for their blockage and humanitarian violations on Yemen. Now, very interestingly, the United States made a similar statement just a week ago, and the Saudi Arabians responded the same way they did last time, with more Saudi-led coalition air raids and bombing of Yemen. This time killing at least 8 women and 2 girls heading home from a wedding, as they were heading home in one vehicle that was targeted by Saudi Arabia. That even Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, pointed out that, quote, "This might be even worse than Harvey Weinstein." And obviously, but yet there's still no outcry as the world and the mainstream media totally ignore the humanitarian crisis that's happening right now in Yemen. So, on the international world stage, you have the UK, the United States, condemning Saudi Arabia for creating right now the world's worst humanitarian crisis, leaving almost 7 million people on the brink of famine. Saudi Arabia responds by bombing the crap out of them even more, and the United States, United Kingdom are like, yeah. So yeah, once again, their words to the world stage are completely different than their actions. Especially since many people don't know this, but the United States and United Kingdom are a part of the Saudi-led coalition and their war on the Houthi Iranian-linked rebels in Yemen right now, which of course is a proxy war against Iran, which of course is not a great American foreign policy and does not make America come first. And once again, we are seeing that exemplified by Donald Trump's U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, who is still rambling on about, as this article said, incoherent diatribes on Iran, which she's blaming for supplying Houthi rebels in Yemen with ballistic missiles, ultimately fanning the flames for another conflict in the region, which even France came out against officially in the United Nations, cautioning the United States over their, quote, evidence on the Iran weaponry in Yemen. And of course, Donald Trump's foreign policy could be epitomized by supporting Saudi Arabia and Israel with their greater geopolitical conflict with Iran, which they can't wait to start. And even Saudi Arabian state-run media came out with a video, a propaganda film, showing the invasion of Iran by Saudi Arabia. Of course, escalating the war of words between these two empires in a really crappy 3D video. That is really just stupid and foolish. Since, you know, a conflict between these two major empires would lead to a global conflict with their allies that would, of course, involve Russia and China. Which, of course, is why Donald Trump officially declared China and Russia revisionist powers and competitors on today's stage, following the neoconservative doctrine and policy that has been laid out through the presidents before him. Now, of course, as that's happening, the United States is not focusing on infrastructure, which Donald Trump said he would, but only expanding the conflicts happening all around the world, like right now in Afghanistan, where thousands of U.S. troops have participated in ground operations in Afghanistan. Of course, only escalating the war in Afghanistan, which, you know who I'm talking about. Many alternative media figures have been saying that the Afghanistan policy by Trump is really a drawdown, which I call that as bullcrap. I had a bunch of people attack me. And now, once again, the analysis that I was telling you about has completely come true. And of course, it only gets worse, as we're finding out that the US-led coalition inside of Syria right now is still training militants. Even though Donald Trump promised he wouldn't train the rebels, they still are, covertly. Which again, is a stupid move, which even Donald Trump said was stupid when he was campaigning to be president, especially since a new investigation has concluded that 97% of the weapons used by ISIS were supplied illegally by the United States and Saudi Arabia. Which, again, I and other independent journalists have been calling out for years now, and still described as a, quote, conspiracy theorist by the mainstream media establishment. And that's bullcrap, because we were dead on the money. And with this new investigation that was conducted by the Conflict Armament Research Group, which actually looked at 40,000 items recovered from ISIS militants, it's pretty much clear that our taxes finance terrorism, but yet still, here in the United States, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are not facing any legal liability for it, while Donald Trump is still continuing to train the rebels in Syria. And you know, with ISIS being financially rewarded by Western powers to get rid of Bashar al-Assad, they said, hey, let's just create more global terrorism, which the West now has to deal with. And unless there's actually some recourse, some justice for this, there's no way of dealing with this problem of terrorism in the West without addressing this problem first. Something that all the right-wing trumpets need to realize if they really legitimately want to end terrorism in the West. Will they? I don't know. Share this video with them. Maybe it will help. And it's not just the West facing terrorism, it's also Russia, as we're learning that U.S. intelligence has actually thwarted a major terrorist attack in Russia. Information, of course, that were shared by Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, over a recent phone call. Now, of course, this is a good sign, showing that there is actual cooperation between these two countries when it comes to defeating radical Islamic terrorists. And of course, with the information that Donald Trump presented Vladimir Putin, they were able to stop a major terrorist attack. Now, of course, this is not really that uncommon, since even Russia warned the United States of the Boston Marathon bombing suspects before their terrorist attack in Boston. But unlike Russia, the United States didn't really listen to that intelligence and failed to prevent the terrorist attack that happened in Boston. And now moving forward in other failed government policies that don't work or actually serve the American people, let's talk about tax reform. And I do have to say, it's been an extremely complicated topic to get into, since the ramifications and stipulations behind the new tax plan that the US government is working on right now is ever changing. And of course, it's changing drastically before our eyes every single moment. And I actually stand with the lolitarians on this one, and I believe taxation is tough. But one clear sign we're getting from this new tax reform bill is that, of course, it will greatly benefit the big banks and Goldman Sachs, which, hey, is not a surprise since many Goldman Sachs figures are within Trump's administration. And once again, when the tax reform bill actually comes to fruition, we're going to give a full, detailed breakdown on what exactly is happening. But right now, it's just too stupid to get into, filled with corruption, just like most of the government. As we're finding out today that there is more than $21 trillion in unauthorized government spending on the heels of the Defense Department actually conducting its first ever audit. That is $65,000 stolen from every citizen of the United States for the past 17 years. And pretty much what else do you expect from a corrupt institution that has the mainstream media doing their own dirty work? There's obviously some money to silence people, influence people, and probably worse, so you do not see the full extent of what your money and your taxes are actually going to. And it's definitely not defense. But hey, at least Bitcoin is doing good. A lot of lolitarians are very happy. And hopefully it's not a honeypot created by a government to create a cashless society. But I'll actually get into more of that later on this channel, so don't forget to subscribe. And oh yeah, wait, there's also the pedophiles and sexual abusers that are working within our government that actually are protected by your tax dollars when it comes to settling sexual harassment and sexual misconduct abuse committed by U.S. politicians, which your tax dollars actually pay for silencing the victims and making sure that no one hears of this story. And in some good news, the House of Representatives is actually considering changing that law and making sure that the pedos and sexual abusers in U.S. government cannot be protected anymore. And it's not just shocking that the U.S. government has this policy of using your taxes to pay off victims and shut them up, but this is a reoccurring trend in all aspects of society, not just politics, where victims of powerful people are just thrown money at and told to shut up, while the high powerful criminals are allowed to continue to do what they do without any scrutiny, allowing the cycle of abuse to continue. Like we're learning right now happens at NBC, as we're finding out that a former NBC staffer was paid off after accusing Chris Matthews of sexual harassment. This, of course, allegedly happened in 1999, and of course all the details are still coming out about this situation. And it's not just Chris Matthews facing the heat from this, as the Women's March organizers, Linda Sarsour, is now being accused of covering up sex abuse, as well as harassment in the workplace and enabling sexual assault. And for an organizers of the Women's March to be accused of overseeing an environment that was unsafe and abusive to women is definitely a catchy headline. Now, of course, these are just allegations, and it will be very interesting to see where this case will go. But just looking at the news today, the only response I have is, and I don't know about you, but I'm just flabbergasted with what's really happening in the world and what is being portrayed to the world. How do you feel? Let me know in the comment section below. If you think I missed a story that I should have covered today, let me know in the comment section below. And of course, all the sources to this video will be in our Steemit post, which will also be posted in the comment section, and also my Twitter account, twitter.com/LukeWeAreChange, so you could fact check everything yourself. And of course, most importantly, come to your own discoveries and truth. Don't believe anybody except yourself, which is the overall message that we try to promote. And if you want to see it grow and prosper, don't forget to support us on wearechange.org/donate, because it is mainly your contributions and donations that keep this independent media broadcast running. And that is why I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on youtube.com/wearechange.